All right, we are on. So, first of all, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in to us for Burnin Rubber, the socially distanced edition. This will go out on YouTube and as well as Anchor and Spotify later on at some point this weekend. My name is Sterling Siemens. I'm the co-host and producer for this program, joined by my regular co-hosts, Justin Palmer and Hal Eastep. And on this special edition, we're joined by a special guest, a radio host at KRU, the radio station on UMKC, as well as a freelance motorsport rider and my good friend, Mr. Gavyn Do. Gavyn, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to join us this afternoon to talk some motorsports with us.
And you're already making me smile just like saying all that details. I know I'm not the most entitled person on earth, but yeah, thank you for having me. You sent me that invite, so I'm glad. I always love talking about motorsports in general, and usually my other co-host, he goes by Logan. He's usually busy, so there's been some times where I've been doing it by myself. But other than that, though, such an honor. Can't wait to talk more and more about, what's going on within the motorsports industry despite this pandemic going on.
Absolutely. It's great to be talking some motorsports with everything going on today, April the 18th, 2020. Just making sure you all are doing really well and staying healthy, not coughing up anything at all. Hopefully.
Yeah.
I hope I'm good.
I don't think I got corona yet, so I think so far so good.
Fingers crossed that we stay healthy. So, what do you say we just jump right into the agenda? We'll start with the weekend in review. There was only one race that happened this past weekend for iRacing. It was the IndyCar iRacing Challenge, the Chevrolet 275 at Virtual Michigan International Speedway. Defending Indy 500 champion Simon Pagenaud ended up winning the race on fuel mileage. He beat his teammate Scott McLaughlin, and NASCAR veteran Dale Earnhardt Jr. finished third for this race, which was something that a lot of people didn't expect. Overall, it was a really fun race, really interesting to watch the IndyCars, watch those chassis go at it on Michigan. I'll start with Justin on this. It was really fun to watch IndyCar get back to racing in a sense at Michigan for the first time since 2007, the last time IndyCar was actually there at Michigan. Does Michigan have a place on the schedule in the future?
I'm not really sure if Michigan's going to have a place just because of the Detroit duels still being on the schedule. I still feel like 3 races in the state of Michigan would be too much. However, if it was anything to prove, I think there is still a good sense of urgency to get back to Michigan. And it's one of my favorite racetracks for the IndyCar side when I used to watch it. But I also got to say, they went full 1996, didn't they, at the start of the race? They could not even get back to the start-finish line and to get the green flag going, and they went full 1996 Michigan all over again.
96 US 500, digitally remastered for 2020, basically. Hal, what was your take on the race on Saturday?
It was a very good race. I agree that they should try to get back to Michigan. Detroit does pose that problem of 3 races. I can't agree with that. Well, and the question becomes, well, how would you solve that? And it'd be, well, you're going to have to take some race away to get Michigan in there, and it would be those races. And you have to weigh how much do people like the Detroit duels compared to how many people would love to watch a race at Michigan. And I think you'd get more people wanting to see the race at Michigan.
Exactly. Gavyn, what was your take on it?
Yeah, the start, as you mentioned, really rocky, but once the race actually started getting into a good rhythm, the racing was actually pretty promising to look at, As Hal actually kind of nailed it to the point, because I kind of had the same ideal. Like, some races in the Detroit Belle Isle in Detroit can be good and maybe a mixed bag in general, but, I actually started watching IndyCar in 2007, and Michigan was one of the first few races I watched, and everybody knows, that Dario Franchitti flip and all that, I think that's probably one of the more iconic moments in that year itself. But, I think it would be interesting to see how, like, if Michigan theoretically was on the schedule, the speedway that is, I wonder how they would juggle along those Detroit duels, really, because I am curious on how like IndyCar is going to focus upon their oval package. It has been much better. Like, last year, the Indy 500, I thought was a very solid race to watch compared to what the 2018 Indy 500 was. How dirty air was kind of a bad thing with that oval package, but they fixed it up last year. And well, if they had that for Michigan, the same one, I think it would probably provide maybe some good potential racing like we saw in the Indy 500. Really, I would actually love to see Michigan back on the schedule personally.
Yeah, just for oval racing, I think it'd be a great thing to have Michigan come back, because I know that they had the US 500, which then became the Michigan 500, and a lot of open wheel fans will say we prefer Michigan 500. We don't speak of US 500 because of that one time that happened in '96, but no, a 500-mile race at Michigan I think it would be really beneficial for IndyCar. I think a 500-miler at California would also be pretty interesting, although I remember the last time that they did a 500-miler at California, it didn't end very well. Some drivers were very, very critical of the safety or lack thereof during that race. But yeah, I think it'd be nice to head back to Michigan. And as for the start, I feel like that's something we should have expected coming, that we should have expected to happen, but it was still hilarious.
They just crashed in the IndyCar race. They just crashed on lap 2 in the IndyCar race.
Oh man!
Just for the record, as they're saying.
Oh geez.
Yes. For those who are unaware, there is another IndyCar race that's happening right now. The virtual race at Twin Ring Motegi. The iRacing randomizer event. It chose the Twin Ring Motegi to run the virtual round 4 of the IndyCar iRacing Challenge. Oliver Askew currently leads at lap 5, and they are under the caution for a crash that happened very early in the race. So we'll be providing updates about that race as the show goes on. But I also want to talk about Scott McLaughlin and Dale Earnhardt Jr. They finished 2nd and 3rd. For McLaughlin, I'm trying to remember, because this was his first oval start. And we've hyped up Scott McLaughlin quite a bit on this show for his 18 wins that happened in V8 Supercars last year, and how he was the 3rd fastest in preseason testing at Circuit of the Americas for IndyCar this year. There was talk that he could run up to 8 races this season, although now with the pandemic going on, that's thrown a wrench into those plans. But for McLaughlin and for Dale Earnhardt Jr., who never had even run anything related to IndyCar up until Saturday, it's got to be an impressive showing for them. McLaughlin in particularly. Hal, I'll start with you. What do you think of Scott McLaughlin's runs during these first 3 races of iRacing, and anything to take from Dale Jr.'s run?
Scott McLaughlin has been incredibly impressive. And it started with that Circuit of the Americas testing. I was firmly on the hype train right then and there that he was going to be something in IndyCar. And now on iRacing, he's proving he can run with these guys, of course, on a virtual standpoint, and it's very realistic, though. So I think it's a good measuring stick that, yeah, he's got the talent. And with Dale Jr., all I could think was, you know what? I want to see him run the Indy 500 before he's done racing it like entirely. He runs like one Xfinity race a year, basically. I want to see him get an IndyCar.
Excellent. Gavin, any takeaways from McLaughlin and Jr.?
Yeah, I've paid attention to Scott McLaughlin on like V8 Supercars itself since his career started, back down at like Gary Rogers Motorsports, then eventually the move to DGR Team Penske, Dick Johnson Racing for short in this case, or that's the long-term name of that is. Coming close back in like 2017, losing to Jamie Whincup in the championship, and then basically putting on a clinic in 2018, 2019, winning those championships consecutively, already showcasing an essence of dominance down in that series. And then you mentioned his great speed in the Circuit of the Americas testing session. You said 3rd quickest, right? So already, because the adaptability between an IndyCar and a supercar are so much more different, like it's hard to adjust. We can use maybe Juan Pablo Montoya as an example. He used to do a lot of Champ Car and IndyCar, had to transfer over to a stock car. There's so much different variables that make the drivability a little bit worse or harder in this case, let's just say that, or maybe easier because, let's say the stock car has less grip and an Indy car has a lot more, a lot more traction compared to that of a stock car. They're kind of incomparable in terms of driver skill. And Scott McLaughlin adapting to this Indy car is already like a big testament to how fast he can actually adjust. It's hard to really like transfer one part of like, your talent to like another kind of feature within a car. And I think that's what makes it fascinating for McLaughlin. And then, transferring that over to iRace and getting those good results, it's an impressive feat. And it really does showcase the potential Scott McLaughlin has for the future of IndyCar.
Justin, over to you.
I said it last week that all this pandemic is doing is giving us a bigger and bigger tease of what he can do when he actually gets into an IndyCar. And again, 18 wins is absolutely unheard of in any motorsport Earth Series out there. I mean, even Richard Petty's 27-win season came in a season where there was 72 races, sanctioned races, I should say, and half the time he's running an engine that's built for or drag racing or just out of the military. Okay, so yeah, it's unbelievable what he's been able to do in a Super 8 car, and now he's translating it into the iRacing IndyCar series. If there was a point series, he would probably be right up there. I think he would be a close to first if I'm not mistaken. But also the Dale Jr. I don't think Jr. is going to go into IndyCar. I think his wife is going to prevent him from doing that, and he's got a kid now. He's had enough of scary incidents in the past couple of years to go back out there and run in an open wheel car. But it was a great result. It was fun to see Dale Jr. crossover into the IndyCar series, and he may have had a little bit of help from the fuel mileage, but overall, a solid performance from the Junebug.
Yeah, I kind of want to ask Hal a question here. So, if Dale Jr. theoretically went and attempted the Indy 500, what team would you say he would go to? Obviously, it'd probably be a Chevy affiliate team, like a Chevy team. But what team would you say would be the best choice for Dale Jr. if he had that offer?
That's a really good question because we've seen with the whole Fernando Alonso saga that finding an IndyCar team to give you a one-off Indy 500 appearance is harder now. Because especially with this pandemic and funding is going to be harder to get, it would be incredibly tough. I see that now. I was just kind of one of those, I want to see it, but I don't realistically see it happening.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a team, I don't think he definitely wouldn't find one, unfortunately. There are other IndyCar drivers they'd rather have in the car.
Yeah, I feel like,
I would. Go ahead.
I feel like if Junior was to go to an IndyCar team just for like a one-off event, it would be a Chevy-powered team. I don't know if Penske would be willing to provide the opportunity because they're pretty set and sewn on like 3 full-time cars and then 1 part-time entry that like Scott McLaughlin could take just for a few races, or Elio Castroneves for the 500. I don't think you could take Andretti because Andretti's powered by Honda right now. And Junior, in my opinion, just from what I've observed, he seems to be a pretty big Chevy loyalist. But I feel like Ed Carpenter, if they opened up another car just for a partial schedule, Junior might be willing to take it. But at the same time, Justin had a really good point. Junior, he's had a lot of health issues. He's had his concussions in the past. To me, this iRacing thing for him was just like a fun little getaway. Like, oh, well, I've got time on my hands. There's nothing else to do. Let me just get in this iRacing event for Michigan, hop in a car and see what happens. And he ends up finishing third. Like, oh, okay, I got a podium on my debut. I'm perfect on that regard, and I'm out. Peace. So, yeah. And Junior's, by the way, Junior is expecting another child, another baby girl coming soon for the Earnhardt family. So congrats to him on that. Congrats to he and his wife, Amy, for their second child, and to their daughter, Isla, who's going to be a big sister now. So, yeah. With that, Justin, you had another point you were going to say?
I would say one more thing on it, and that's probably going to be it. I feel like there's a lot more NASCAR or personalities that would be in position to get an IndyCar ride before Dale Jr. Obviously, you have Jimmy Johnson, who's been crossing over. Kyle Busch has wanted to do the Indy 500 for or ages at this point. And he's racing right now. I think he will eventually go and try to do the double. And you have Tony Stewart, who again, at Indianapolis right now with the 4th of July, he's looking to try to complete a triple header. So we'll see who would. I just think there's going to be too many drivers in the queue to get in the 500 ride. And it's so rare for NASCAR drivers to cross over to the IndyCar side. And even for a one-off, the last time we've seen a IndyCar or NASCAR duel was Kurt Busch back when he did the Indy 500 double. And before that, it was, I believe, all the way back to Tony Stewart, if I'm not mistaken.
It's either that or Robbie Gordon. I think it was
Robbie Gordon.
I think it was Robbie
2003,
Gordon.
I think. But it's been, but that just shows you it was a decade between Kurt Busch and Robbie Gordon. It would be now Dale Jr., it would only be the one race, and that would be, but it would also be the same for Tony Stewart and Jimmy Johnson if Jimmy Johnson decides to hang it up this year, regardless of the outcome of the pandemic.
Yeah. I'm looking at the list of drivers who have attempted the double. Because I know Robbie Gordon attempted it in 2003. Kurt Busch did it in 2014. Tony Stewart in 2001. I'm trying to see if John Andretti, because I know he did it at some point. I think he was the first driver to actually do it in 1994. Yes, Andretti did it in 1994. But, yeah, it's not a common occurrence. So when the double is pulled off, it's treated as a big deal in motorsports. And if, Kyle Busch, he wants to do it. I don't know who would be willing to take the opportunity. I think he tried getting a ride with Penske or Andretti, but the ride never materialized. But it would be nice to see another NASCAR driver get involved with that at some point. So if that's all to talk about iRacing, IndyCar, and NASCAR drivers crossing into IndyCar, there was another race that happened on Sunday, Monza Madness it was on Landon Castle's stream. He did a really good job of promoting it. And the big selling point, in my opinion, was that Alan Bestwick did lap-by-lap commentary for the event, which, by the way, get Alan Bestwick in a broadcast booth as soon as possible. Every NASCAR fan will thank you for it.
Not at the expense of Mike Joy, though. Not at the expense of Mike Joy.
Exactly. If Mike Joy retires, then put Alan Bestwick in there. That's done and done. That's how it should be. But honestly, I don't even remember who won that race because there was okay, let's just enough dancing around it. Let's strap in those seat belts, pull those belts tight one more time, as Larry Mack would put it, because this is a pretty heavy subject. For those who are watching or listening to us, I can't imagine you haven't heard about this situation by now, but if you haven't, just be prepared. So on Sunday, during the Monza Madness stream, Kyle Larson, the driver of the number 42 Chevrolet Camaro ZL1 for Chip Ganassi Racing in the NASCAR Cup Series, was overheard using a racial epithet during the live stream event. Now, based on his conversation that he was having with other drivers at the time, it seems as though he intended to not have it go out over public, but it did anyway. And the reaction of drivers was quick, and it was not pretty. And in addition, the following day, NASCAR and sponsors were not happy. Starting on Monday, once the aftermath and the whole context of the situation became clear, NASCAR and Chip Ganassi Racing both indefinitely suspended Kyle Larson without pay. And in addition, Larson would be and is still currently mandated to complete racial sensitivity training by NASCAR. However, to make matters worse for Larson, The following sponsors either all suspended or terminated entirely their relationships with Larson. Those sponsors and corporations include Chevrolet, Credit One Bank, Lucas Oil, McDonald's, Clover, Fiserv, and iRacing. They all suspended or terminated their relationships with Larson. And in addition, iRacing, the server that Larson was racing on at the time the epithet was uttered, not only did they end their sponsorship of him, but they also banned him from the iRacing server. Now, Larson issued a video apology via Twitter on Monday, the following day after the incident occurred Sunday night. However, things only got worse for Kyle Larson the next day on Tuesday, when Chip Ganassi Racing announced that they had fired Kyle Larson from the team. In addition, the World of Outlaws has said that Larson is eligible to compete in their competition as long as he completes racial sensitivity training over the next 30 days. So, with all of that said, Gavin, I'll start with you on this subject because I gotta be honest, this is really shocking, especially for someone like Kyle Larson, who is a graduate of the Drive for Diversity program in NASCAR. I mean, just what are your thoughts on this whole situation to start with?
I find it really shocking, honestly. Like, I wouldn't have expected it for Kyle Larson to even say it, like, just say it like so casually too. That's also what shocked me too. Me and Sterling discussed about this beforehand when we were talking with Brett Whittingham and Brian Starr, but like it really shocked me that I mean, like, you can't just say it like that either. You can't just say it in general. There we go. I can't. I have horrible phrasing with that, but like as someone, like you said, he's from the Drive for Diversity program, the NASCAR Diversity program. He's half Japanese, half American. He's the half. And for me, I'm a Vietnamese person. So like someone trying to get into the industry, and this might sound like a minor issue because I don't think it will be a big issue, but like it puts really a bad name for like even like us as minority in a way too. And it also like antagonizes, or not really antagonizes, but it brings along the stereotype also that, we've been trying to avoid within NASCAR. And that's like, and this is especially during like a hard time during this coronavirus outbreak, and everybody migrating over to sim racing, in this case iRacing, since I've messed around with iRacing too, so I know there's like, and when you have like so I'll explain this a little bit too. How there's a spotter, so there's sections in iRacing. There's spotters chat, there's the general chat, drivers chat, and then there's like spectators chat. And so you typically have hotkeys set up, and Kyle Larson pressed obviously the wrong hotkey because he's trying to tell it to a spotter, and well, what happened, and well, all hell basically broke loose. And it, like I said, it's really just put a bad name for us as like NASCAR fans, because we want the sport to succeed. We don't want any like setbacks to hinder the status of NASCAR as a sport, and it really does suck though. And like it was Kyle Larson, I think, deserved the punishment. Obviously there's second chances, but that's something Kyle Larson himself is going to have to learn the hard way.
Yeah, Justin.
Disappointing. That's really the word or that I have to say about the situation. I did not hear it live. I was watching the Landon Castle stream, which that was not the stream that the word was said on. It was said on a bunch of the drivers had their Twitch channels up, and they were broadcasting the event. NASCAR had that event on their channel, but they were using Landon's stream. But it's really just disappointing. And for not only just the overall impact on how that makes NASCAR look. I mean, and rarely do you get CNN, NBC, Fox News, all of those corporations talking about NASCAR, or you rarely hear it. And for all of them to be talking about NASCAR and for this one moment, it's set NASCAR back for at least 20 years, if not more. Because that's your perception of NASCAR. That's your, first look at NASCAR for some people is a guy using a racial slur.
Yep.
That's a big problem. And NASCAR's been trying to get rid of it for years. It is been obvious in their marketing campaign that they've been promoting diversity. They've had a lot with Bubba Wallace. They've had a lot with Daniel Suarez, and they've even had Kyle Larson with it and representing that diversity. And it's disappointing when you have someone who takes all that NASCAR has done goodwill-wise with their marketing campaign, with NASCAR's diversity class, all of that, to try to promote those, not only those drivers, but to interest as minority communities because for the history of NASCAR, it's been pretty much white male.
Mm-hmm.
That's 99.5% of all NASCAR drivers are white male. So it's very disappointing, and Larson had it coming, and all the repercussions. And I said that last week when we were talking about Bubba Wallace losing Blue Emo, and it really harkens here. Your representation of your team, your sponsors, everything does not end when you leave the racetrack. Anything you do in public, whether it's at a bar, at a fan event, and even on iRacing, and especially on iRacing, anything you do has consequences. Anything you do in public has consequences, and Larson got probably the worst consequences is that you can probably have in the sport of NASCAR. And I hope he learns from it. I hope he can better himself as a person. But right now, I'm just flat out disappointed with him. That's all I gotta say.
Hallie, Step, your take on Kyle Larson.
So I just find it to be a fact of life that when all your actions have consequences, and let me start off by saying that every time that word is used is a bad time. This was somehow one of the worst timings you could do this as a NASCAR driver when nothing else is happening in the sports world. ESPN and all of the major sports networks need news, and you gave them the worst possible news for the sport. There is no situation where that should be a word in your vocabulary. That's just my opinion. I think that's the opinion of everybody here. That shouldn't be in your vocabulary. To use it that casually, Gavin made this point very clear. It's jarring, because how does it become that casual of a word for you to use? And that's an answer I don't think we're going to get, because Kyle Larson is going to go under the radar for a while. It's the one thing he has to do to get out of the public eye. Stay quiet and go through your sensitivity training, and that's your only hope. The second chance isn't going to come very soon. It's going to take a long time for you to be accepted back into the sport with open arms. And there aren't going to be only open arms. There are going to be people who are going to say, I still don't want you back in this sport because of what you said. And on that note, I think the punishment was very justified. It was very fair. This is what happens. These companies in their sponsor agreements, I'm pretty sure most of them have a morality clause. And with the usage of that word on that live stream, he broke that clause, and they had every right to terminate the relationship. And after that, the worst part is I can already see for many people who saw this story on CNN and all those mainstream media sources, they probably saw NASCAR driver uses that word, and they probably didn't flinch and just went, I'm not surprised because of the stigma this sport has had. And that's the worst part to me, that everyone who had that preconceived stereotype about NASCAR and its fans and its drivers, this justified that stigma to them, that we aren't any better than that. And quite frankly, it's hard for me to say that we are better, because I read the Twitter responses to Chip Ganassi Racing firing Kyle Larson, and all I could think was they're showing that we aren't better than that just yet. We haven't made enough progress. There's more progress to be made for NASCAR, the sport, and the fan base itself. And it's sad that this had to happen for that to come back to light.
Yeah, I'm like, I remember I was on my last break of an 8-hour shift from Walmart when I found out about what Kyle Larson did. This reflects terribly on so many different people and organizations. First, it reflects awfully on Kyle Larson, because any goodwill, any respect that he had amongst the fan base of NASCAR and racing community, gone, just like that, for uttering that. I mean, I try not to specify too much, but I know, like, it also, I'll get to that conversation later, but it reflects badly on Larson for just how casually he used it, because it seems like he's used it before on an iRacing stream or just in conversations with friends. Just like oh, hey, well, it's like, wow. I mean, it shows terrible social awareness on Larson's part. Second, it reflects badly on NASCAR and their Drive for Diversity program. I mean, you have a sport that's primarily based in the American South, or its roots are in the American South. They've been really trying to do everything they can to say, hey, we've got diversity. We've got Bubba Wallace. We had Danica Patrick. Haley Deegan is coming up through the ranks. We got Daniel Suarez. We've got, we did have Nur Ali. We just have drivers of various backgrounds. They want to come race for NASCAR. We had Juan Pablo Montoya for several years.
Marcos Ambrose
too. We have drivers from all over, from different countries, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different races. Like, obviously you can't ignore the Wendell Scott time when drivers were threatening to boycott races, and Wendell Scott wasn't even credited with his one victory, because NASCAR, or at least the organizers for their event that he won, they feared that people were going to break out into fights and riots after it happened. But, Wendell Scott was a trailblazer for the sport. And for the Drive for Diversity program, for Kyle Larson, who is a graduate of that program, for him to go out and say the N-word with a hard R on the end of it is just so infuriating. I had some respect for Kyle Larson before Sunday. It's gone now, especially after what he did. It reflects badly on the Drive for Diversity program, as I've mentioned, because now it shows, like, hey, we tried this. Well, yeah, one of your graduates just said one of the worst racial epithets ever imaginable. So it reflects badly on the fan base, because, like, I'm confident that most of the NASCAR fans are, accepting people of any kind. Like, they'll accept anybody into the sport. And this is what makes me even more upset, watching some of the reactions on Twitter and Facebook. Oh my gosh. Looking at some of the reactions there, it's like, some people are like, oh, it's just a word. Oh, rappers use it, or why not him? I don't care. It's racist. Just point it out for what it is. It's boilerplate racism. So it reflects badly on NASCAR fans who are actually welcoming and accepting of other people into the sport. And it's bad for the reputation of NASCAR, because what Kyle Larson did on Sunday, it sets the sport back decades in progress and social perception. Because now, Hal, Justin, Gavin, you guys all mentioned it. People are going to see this headline. They're like, dumb rednecks, dumb hillbillies doing the same thing. Racist. I'm like, that's not what everyone is, though. And it reflects badly on iRacing too, because it sucks that the progress of the sport that has been worked so much trying to get back to trying to say, hey, we're inclusive of everybody. It's it's such a pain that all that progress is set back now because one of the rising stars of the sport had to use language that's used by a 12-year-old playing Call of Duty.
I mean, you absolutely nailed it. And really just going back to the response on Twitter afterward when he said it, I was like, when I first heard it, it was through the Twitch chat. People were saying, and Larson said that word. Larson said that word. And my immediate reaction was, no, he did. There's no way he did it. And then I saw the clip and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to, like, my immediate reaction wasn't the fact that Kyle Larson did do that. It was the fact that I knew what the fan reaction was going to be, which I think is even worse than worse in some parts, I should say, that than and what Larson said, because that's what people are seeing. People are seeing the response of, oh, it's just one word, and people use it all the time in rapping and all that crap, and I'm just like, no, and it just reflects poorly on the stereotype of what NASCAR is. And I mean, growing up in Northern Illinois, being the only NASCAR fan around for a good while, for probably a decade or so, people would always say NASCAR is just a white, pretty much it's just a white a sport of guys going around left. And for a while, I would try to defend that statement by pointing to Danica Patrick, Bubba Wallace, Daniel Suarez, as Kyle Larson even. But now it just reinforces that, there's no argument anymore. There's no argument for, NASCAR not being racist. Because it's everybody's now going to point back to what Kyle Larson said on Sunday night. It doesn't matter anymore. And I want to go to the point of Chip Ganassi, and thank goodness I think Chip Ganassi's not going to lose sponsors because of this. I think, because I immediately also thought that this could kill Chip Ganassi Racing, and at least on the NASCAR side, and because sponsors would want to go out. And I think Incredible One, McDonald's, they've all stated that we're staying with Chip Ganassi Racing. We're against Kyle Larson. And I appreciate those sponsors for sticking with Chip Ganassi Racing. And it just goes to show how strong of a relationship that Chip Ganassi has built with those companies. But that could have been detrimental to Chip Ganassi Racing. And I think we're only beginning to see the beginning of the fallout here from other sponsors, because we saw it 2 weeks ago with Bubba Wallace. Blue Emo was probably looking for a way to get out with the impending the coronavirus pandemic just is ravaging companies. They're looking for a way to cut expenses, and probably sponsorship for NASCAR is going to be one of those expenses is that they're looking at sponsoring drivers. And I think companies are seeing this, and they now have a perfect excuse to get out of the sport. They have a perfect excuse to get out of the sport, no matter what their other drivers do. They have an excuse now to leave the sport, because they don't want to be associated with Kyle Larson. It's guilty by association is what I'm trying to say. Sponsors don't want to be guilty by association here, and they'll be looking for a way to pull out here. So I think this is only the beginning of the fallout we're going to see from this incident.
Gavin, anything else to add about this whole situation?
Honestly, I can't imagine the Kyle Larson fans that are going through this experience too, for their perspective to know that an idol basically just said the hard R word, just like that. It must be devastating for them. Like, honestly, like to know that your favorite driver. So let's say, like, I'm a Jeff Gordon fan, and suddenly Jeff Gordon decided to say, like, the N word. Like, that's going to shake you. That's going to, like, traumatize you for a while, Like, in a fan's perspective, you're going to, like, your scope upon NASCAR drivers will also be, like, inflicted or, like, impacted in a negative manner. And as Justin pointed out with sponsors, also think about like new sponsors coming into the sport. Think about how with Kyle Larson, this big ordeal going on, new sponsors are probably going to like look away from this now because of it. And all the sponsorship already enough is already expensive for NASCAR standards, but the fact is that it's going to discourage new sponsors from actually joining into the organization in terms of exposing their business out there, because they don't want to associate themselves with some that stereotype of people being racist or saying derogatory words like that.
Yeah. Hallie, Step, your take on how NASCAR will be impacted by this?
I think it will. This is going to hurt really bad because I think that's obvious enough. The perception of NASCAR has taken a massive hit with this entire controversy. I'm hopeful that the companies currently in NASCAR know there's a reason it's taken so long for something horrible like this to actually happen in the public eye for NASCAR. Because with the perception of it, you would think that it's happened so many times, but no, it hasn't. There's a reason this is a massive controversy, because this is so out of the norm. So I would hope that the companies in NASCAR at the moment, they know that this is not normal. But you're right that they need a reason to cut expenses, and this would be it. I don't think they're going to cut expenses during the season because that would break many clauses in the contract. But for the deals that are expiring, they're probably not going to renew because of this. And quite frankly, you can't blame them for that either, because Kyle Larson just ruined a lot of many people's income because of this. The first thing that came to mind watching their reactions in that stream was he just put so many people in a horrible situation, because everyone in that stream, you just dropped a bomb on them. What are they supposed to do now? They can't just go and be like, well, there goes Kyle doing something later on in the race. They can't address him in the race, or else they feel like they're probably going to be associated with him. And poor Anthony Alfredo had to be the one to drop the bomb that you're on live. You said that on a hot mic. And you had to feel for everybody else there, because I'm sure many of them are friends with Kyle Larson. They didn't know that about him. And that's got to hurt. That's got to hurt them. And Gavin made a great point about the fans. For half of it's unfortunate that I have to say there's a split in the fan base, because half of them are incredibly disappointed. Reading the responses, they're incredibly disappointed in Kyle Larson, as they should be. But there's another half that is unfortunately jumping on Chip Ganassi for having the audacity to fire him. Which, first of all, Chip Ganassi, after those sponsors pulled out, didn't have a choice. Chip Ganassi had to make that move, and it was the right move. Kudos to those companies for basically saying that we're still on board with you, Chip. We know this isn't a reflection on you or your team. Whoever you put in that car next, we are on board with. I can't say enough how good that is. But it's such a horrible situation for the team, too, because the crew chief and all of his crew members are probably also all blindsided. This was blindsiding on every level, on every aspect of NASCAR.
Yeah. Before we go on with, because we will talk more about the 42 team, but to try to wrap up on Larson specifically, there was a lot of reaction after he basically dropped the N-word. A lot of reaction from a lot of different figures in all of professional sports. There was obviously widespread condemnation. There was one reaction from New York Mets pitcher Marcus Stroman that was basically saying, "I'll fight Kyle Larson," which I wouldn't take it that far. And honestly, I was not a fan of Stroman's reaction. I understand his anger and disappointment, but to go to the extent of fighting Kyle Larson, come on, man. Come on. I mean, it is the Mets, and not trying to rub anything in, but go Royals forever. But but kidding aside, though, seeing reactions from even guys who have been racing. There have been several black drivers in NASCAR. You know, there's Wendell Scott, who we mentioned, Bill Lester. He ran several races in the NASCAR Truck Series. You know, Willie T. Ribbs has run many NASCAR and kart as well as road course races. He even ran a full truck schedule for Bobby Hamilton in 2001. But Bubba Wallace is the most relevant figure right now in terms of African Americans running in NASCAR. And to his credit, Darrell Wallace Jr., Bubba Wallace, put out basically a written statement on Friday morning saying that he had talked with Kyle Larson and Larson's apology was sincere and that he's looking to better himself. And to Bubba's credit, he also he stated that Larson is seeking he's going to racial sensitivity training. He's going to go through with it. And he also provided support for Larson that he'll better himself from this. In a time where it's so easy to bag on Kyle Larson for what he did, I do want to say this much. I know, and I'm going to try not to get too political here, but I feel like inevitably we're going to. Because we live in a time where cancel culture is pretty opulent. There are some cases where, just from my perspective, it goes a little too far. And then there's some where it's rightly justified. I mean, you look at Harvey Weinstein. Forget about him as soon as possible. Bill Cosby, for what he did, forget about him. But for Kyle Larson, I don't think people should outright cancel him out. Yes, what he did is despicable. Is it unforgivable to some? Yes, probably. But if Larson is truly, sincerely apologetic and genuinely sorry for what he did, and if he goes through with racial sensitivity training, if he improves himself, if he makes himself a better person for what has happened to him, and he gets another opportunity in NASCAR, or maybe not just NASCAR, but just racing in general, I would want to see him get another opportunity. I don't think it'll happen this year, though, because obviously feathers have been ruffled, bridges have been burned. I don't know if there's any going back for Kyle Larson in 2020. But if Larson is apologetic, if he's genuine, if he truly is sorry for what's happened, then I would hope that out of the forgiveness of the human heart and out of mercy and compassion, that we allow Kyle Larson back into the racing society.
I'll say that I really do hope that Kyle Larson is going to be able to come back if he wants to. So, I mean, obviously, I don't think that time is right now. I don't think it'll happen next year either. But I do hope that he is able to better himself and come out of this stronger. And it's really tough because it's like the Kurt Busch example doesn't apply here of the redemption arc. And like, I was just trying to figure out like who would like first off to the Mets comment, and which I think will lead into my point here. Or who was it that said it again? And I forget the
fight him.
Yeah,
Marcus Stroman.
Yeah, he's seen way too. He saw what happened out of the KSI Logan Paul all drama on YouTube, and man, that kind of actually brings me to the point. I think cancel culture does its job in some parts, and it unjustly does it in other parts. And like, there are two people I think that have proven that they can come back from severely damaging their reputation and burning down bridges. One of them was PewDiePie, when he said it on a live stream. And I mean, obviously there was massive fallout from that, and you see it in YouTube's algorithm and the advertising and all that. But he recovered pretty well. Oh, and he's still pretty popular on YouTube. But I think, and the other is Logan Paul, who, I mean, with the help of KSI and with the whole boxing deal, he was able to recover. I hope that Kyle Larson can put this behind him. He can better himself. Obviously, the two individuals I mentioned have learned from their mistakes. They have tried to move on. They are still haunted by it, and I'm not saying that like they have been forgiven. And those two are still strongly disliked by many and outright hated by others. But they've been able to move on. I hope Kyle Larson can move on. He can be a better person out of this. And I just think that I hope he gets a second chance, and I likely know who would probably give him that second chance. But it's disappointing to see NASCAR's hottest free agent, I would say, going into the 2021 free agency, a silly season, whatever you want to call it, go from the king of the hill to being just is outright despised by everybody. It's justified, but it's disappointing. That's all I got to say about it.
Hallie, your final say on Kyle Larson.
I think in most situations, people deserve a second chance, and this is one of those situations where I think he deserves a second chance. But the problem I see is that sponsors are not going to be the ones to take the risk by giving him that second chance. And for a team that wants a driver like Kyle Larson, you have to take into account all the time sponsorship. You need money rolling in. You're not going to get that because these companies aren't willing to be the ones to give that second chance, because why would they? So if you're a team that can afford to take the hit, then yeah, you probably, give him the second chance. That's fair. He can earn back that chance at sponsorship by showing and showcasing how he's changed. He needs to change is the first part that is important there. He can't just assume that he completes his training and, I can go back to racing. No, you can't. They aren't going to just say you're back just because you completed training. You need to show that you are making an effort to rectify the mistake you have made. And I hate calling it a mistake because it's worse than that. The mistake is you screwed in a screw wrong. This is incredibly different. But for teams that are looking at Kyle Larson, it's going to be, I think, minimum years before they give that chance. I think there's a high chance we'll see him definitely in the lower series, like a truck or Xfinity races before he gets back in Cup, because they're going to just throw him back in there. It is incredibly disappointing, and that's the only difference I see between him and the two YouTubers that Justin cited. They do depend on sponsorships and advertising, but they don't depend on it to the extent where it is going to destroy their attempt at getting into career back on track. They could make videos without monetization. He can't drive in NASCAR without sponsors.
Right. Gavyn, your word on Larson?
Yeah, I mean, I do hope he has a second chance, Like, Larson is still, like, a blooming talent. I know, like, obviously, the mishap he pulled off wasn't really the brightest spot in his career, but like there's still some people that are hoping and optimistic that he'll change. And like you pointed out, Sterling, earlier, if he shows that genuity, that he is willing to change it up or really willing to change his mistakes. We've seen some athletes go through this, and I don't want to go too far into like other sports, but there are some athletes that have had similar experiences, not like saying racial slurs, but like, let's say, worse ordeals. And, they've been able to show that change. And, for fans and spectators alike, they've been able to look over that and see who they are now. I'm not obviously going to put like the Kurt Busch scenario. I could think like 2012 behavior he had, I think everybody knows well enough, the behavior Kurt Busch have. And now you look at him now, he's changed a lot. And, we don't look back at like that 2012 year of Kurt Busch. We'll mention it here and there, but it's not like a negative connotation we have with Kurt Busch now, so if like Kyle Larson is willing to showcase that, he's going to change, and obviously it's going to take a lot of time for him, to step back up to the Cup Series. That is, if he decides to go back to the Cup Series, and it's really just up to Kyle Larson himself. He's the one that controls his own fate from here on out, and he's got to work on getting that respect the hard way.
Yeah. Now that we've talked more about this, I'm reminded of kind of a similar situation that happened in 2013 concerning Jeremy Clements. He was interviewed by MTV after a race. He uttered the N-word and was suspended indefinitely by NASCAR, required to complete racial sensitivity training, which he went through and completed in a matter of 2 weeks. He only missed 2 races on the Xfinity schedule. And he was able to get back in the car, and he's carried on. He's gone on to win a race in Xfinity competition. But considering Larson, a much more high-profile star in NASCAR, saying this, he's going to be out for a while. But I would hope that he improves himself, that he's genuine about his progress as a person, that he'll learn from this, and that eventually he will get back into racing in some way, shape, or form. What he did, obviously, is bad and despicable and has every right to be criticized, and the consequences were justifiable. But to harp on him years from now for this act, I think would be in bad taste, in bad character, and ultimately it would be detrimental. So Larson, he's had the consequences thrown at him. Now it's up to him to improve himself, and for us as racing fans to be like, okay, you did what you did. Now show us you've improved. Only then I think he can get back into the racing circles. Real quick, I do want to mention the IndyCar event that's going on right now. Will Power leads Scott McLaughlin and Simon Pagenaud. It's a Penske 1-2-3 right now. At Virtual Motegi, there are 13 laps to go. And Power, McLaughlin, and Pagenaud at Twin Ring Motegi, now it's 12 to go. Just trying to see all the other cars. James Hinchcliffe is out of the race. He's in 33rd. And well, he's the only car out because Scott Dixon's in 4th after the Penske 1-2-3 currently running. And it looks like they're getting down close to the end of this race. Robert Wickens running in 6th. Interesting note there to keep in mind. But
once again, shout out to Robert Wickens for a phenomenal performance.
Yeah.
It's once again.
I mean, he ran at Michigan last weekend, and the weekend before he finished, I think it was 8th at Barber. So Robert Wickens proven that he can do some good things behind the wheel still. So with the Larson incident set aside and the fallout that's been unfolding, and Kyle Larson's not at Chip Ganassi Racing any longer, and any talk of him getting the 48 car for Hendrick Motorsports is forgotten of. So now we get to the discussion of who replaces Kyle Larson in the 42 once racing returns in reality. Hal, I want to start with you on this. Who do you think is the most realistic option for the 42 ride? And are there any other secondary options you have?
I think the one and I think only option, because he's so connected with Chip Ganassi Racing, is Ross Chastain. I think he's going to be the one to take over. The only question I have is with Ross Chastain taking over the 42, because I believe that's just what's going to happen, is with the 6 car, if Ryan Newman isn't ready to get back in the car, who takes over the 6 car? Because that's the conundrum, is he's already taken over the 6 as the replacement driver. So we all hope that Ryan Newman will be ready to get back in the car. We also, as long as he's recovered 100%. But who would take which car? Because Ross Chastain may have an obligation to be in the 6 car. So it is kind of a big question mark of somebody has to take one of those cars over, and Ross Chastain can't drive both cars. That's my only question mark, and I don't have an answer for it.
That's a good point you brought up there, Hal. Gavin, did you have something to say about that?
I think also another question flies in is the Kaulig contract he has. You know, he's supposed to be running full time in Xfinity this year. Obviously, with this COVID thing, it's kind of set everything back. But, you know, Ross Chastain's running for Xfinity points this year, and obviously he's subbing for Ryan Newman. Everybody knows what happened. And now, you know, this predicament now, and as Hal mentioned, I feel like he's the best candidate for this 42 car realistically. You know, had the opportunity back in 2018, you know, those, 3 races, right? So, Darlington, you know, dominated the stages basically until the incident with Kevin Harvick. Las Vegas basically dominated the race and won. And then Richmond pretty much ran inside top 10, you know, at a track maybe he's not so good at, you know. And, you know, Chip Ganassi had such high hopes for Ross Chastain, was hoping, you know, he had that full-time campaign, you know, until the DC solar ordeal happened and, you know, where FBI literally raided the headquarters in this way. You know, the original, you know, Ganassi contract that Chastain had basically expired due to a sponsorship issue that really wasn't his fault, you know. And, you know, it would be really poetic, you know, with the sponsorship already set in stone. You know, they said they weren't going to be leaving the organization anytime soon. You know, they're just saying no to Kyle Larson. Ross Chastain would basically have guaranteed sponsorship with him if he went to Chip Ganassi. But again, it really matters up to how Kaulig Racing will, the negotiations with Kaulig Racing and Chip Ganassi. I think from what I remember that Ganassi recommended Chastain over to the Kaulig team, right? And if I'm wrong there, correct me. But it's really just the negotiations. I think it won't be as bad since I think like a lot of the teams are pretty flexible with Ross. You know, Ross going with so many different organizations, so he's not necessarily like an affiliate of the sort. And in terms of like whoever is going to fill the 6 car, that's still like a question I'm still trying to like find an answer to. And obviously nobody can have a definite answer out of this. Like Greg Biffle, for all we know, could come back. Matt Kenseth could come out of like the ashes of somewhere and like decide to return. David Regan Smith, those are like in a couple of allotment of drivers that could be candidates for like subbing in terms of maybe the 42. You could also have some of the junior motorsports drivers. It may sound very whimsical. Like you could have like Daniel Hemrick or freaking Jeb Burton, for all we know, like in the 42. Right now, it's kind of an open field at the moment. So, I mean, it's all really up to interpretation at this rate. But in my opinion, in terms of replacing Kyle Larson, Ross Chastain is kind of the most logical choice. But again, it's just the amount of the gaps within both Kaulig and Roush.
While we're still talking about Larson's replacement, I do want to get back to this race that's going on because they're on the last lap. Dixon trying to get inside Simon Pagenaud because Pagenaud has the lead, but he got chopped off. Pagenaud is pulling away from Dixon down the backstretch, going to turn 3, and it looks like Simon Pagenaud is going to go 2 in a row for this for the IndyCar iRacing Challenge. Coming out of turn 4, pulling up next to the pit wall, Simon Pagenaud wins the virtual race at Twin Ring Motegi. Scott Dixon and Will Power complete the podium, and Dixon and Castroneves go flying into the catch fence immediately after the race in turn 1. Fitting ending. What a finish. What a finish. Legend.
I'll have to see that in 6 laps because that's how far I'm behind you. But I will say, though, there is one problem with Ross Chastain. There is too much red tape right now with him. He has his obligations with the 11 car, or he has his obligations right now with Roush Fenway. And don't forget this has kind of been forgotten, all the chaos. He has a 1-race deal with Spire Motorsports in the 77 car. So you got to keep that in mind. I think in 2021 and beyond, it's going to be Ross's car. That's his ride. Nobody's taking it away from him unless he goes to the 48, in which case that would be an even crazier turn of events. And that I don't think anybody would have seen coming in 5 months ago. But the guy who I think is going to take over the 42 car in the very short term, and regardless of what Ross Chastain has to do with Ryan Newman's situation, Colging, and the 77. I think Jamie McMurray is going to be the short-term replacement for Chip Ganassi Racing. And he's already dealt with pretty much every sponsor there except for Clover, I believe. McDonald's was pretty much the bread and butter of that Chip Ganassi car for years. Credit One kind of came on towards the end of McMurray's tenure at Chip Ganassi. And he's already had a connection with that 42 car team. So I think it would be wise to use McMurray in the short term, have him fill in for the rest of the season for Kyle Larson, and then once 2021 hits, get Ross Chastain in that car, or you have all the sponsors lined up, and go out there and start winning races. That's the best way you can put this situation behind you.
Yeah, I was also going to say that if Ross Chastain couldn't get out of his agreement with Roush Fenway, because we're at a point now where with Ryan Newman's recovery, obviously it's a choice of whether or not he wants to come back. But if he's not cleared to get back in that car for a while, Chastain is going to be filling out that 6 car the whole season, in my opinion. So with Chastain's situation, I feel like as long as he's still in the 6 car for Ryan Newman, Chip should probably bring in someone like Jamie McMurray, just come out of retirement and, well, not even full-time retirement, but just bring him out, put him in the 42 for a few races until everything gets resolved, and then put Chastain in the 42 for 2021 once the season is over and everything returns to calm. But, yeah, that's basically what I had thought about for who replaces Kyle Larson. And now we branch into, well, I guess I should ask anything else anybody want to say about Larson's replacement?
I won't say I would also keep throwing out the names of David Reagan. It might come back for the 6 car. I would also throw out the names of Matt Kenseth, Craig Biffle. Who knows? Not Kevin Harvick, but Carl Edwards might come out of his bunker and ruin his Hall of Fame eligibility.
Yeah.
I don't know, pipe dream. But I will say this situation definitely is going to be like it or not, it's going to be the first domino in the 2021 free agency season if Brad Keselowski's right now relationship with Roger Penske wasn't and kind of clear as day. Or Roger Penske, that situation's a little bit murky, so I guess you could say that was the first domino, but this is definitely going to have a lot of impact on how this free agency class is going to go for the NASCAR Cup Series this season.
Yeah. So with that said, let's move on to the next part of the agenda. I'll come back to the future of NASCAR drivers in esports later on. We'll move that later on in the show. But I do want to address a few things. First, let's talk about the weekly update on the money team. Hal, Eastep, is there any news whatsoever?
Here comes the money. Floyd Mayweather's flagship, gonna be the next elite NASCAR team, gonna win a championship one day because he's an undefeated man. There's no news on it. I've been defeated. I'm the one who gets defeated by the no news every week.
This has been your money team update. All right, so good talk on the money team. Let's move on to the next item. Actually, there's a couple things I want to bring up. Ricky Craven has announced that he's retiring. I'll admit I was not entirely privy to the conversation on this, but I believe Ricky Craven's retiring from broadcasting in general.
He's done all together, and definitely wish him the best. One final season for him, and regardless of how this turns out, hopefully we can get him a full 36. And he's been amazing for NASCAR, especially with ESPN, and when he was still there, and when ESPN wasn't and covering NASCAR as much. He definitely was a very serious voice for NASCAR, even during a time when ESPN didn't really cover NASCAR.
All right. And, Gavin, Hal, anything else to say about Ricky Graven?
No, I think Justin pretty much nailed it on the spot, though. He's had such an impact on NASCAR, outside, of driving, helping out with ESPN, as you mentioned. I didn't look too much into Craven's work, but, even so, even putting as much contribution as you can is still huge for, what is kind of considered now kind of a niche interest. How NASCAR has kind of fallen a little bit from obscurity. 90s is like peak, but even so, maintain the culture NASCAR has, during his time, and, for him to, finally leave NASCAR, even so, wish him the best of luck, really, for the rest of his 10 years, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Wishing Ricky nothing but the best of luck in his future endeavors. Also, Martinsville, the weekend at Martinsville scheduled for mid-May, Mother's Day weekend for the NASCAR. I think it was Trucks and Cup Series. It has been postponed. Martinsville is off the table because of ongoing stay-at-home orders that have been expanded and extended throughout the country due to the COVID-19 pandemic. NASCAR has also considered getting back on schedule, trying to resume racing at some point, but without any fans in attendance. Hal, I want to start with you on this, because going back a few months ago, a lot of fans would have thought that's crazy. The races aren't really races without the fans, but should NASCAR go back to racing, even if it means 5 to 6 weeks with no fans at these races whatsoever?
I think that would be the right move to start out with, because, quite frankly, you have to start the season somewhere, and you're not going to get these states to just roll back their stay-at-home orders because they want to race in their state. That's just not going to happen. You're going to have to take the fact that this is just how it's going to be. It's going to hurt the tracks for sure, because that's a lot of ticket sales they were missing out on, because there's no way they can do this with the fans in the near future, because the way I've been reading a couple of these statements is that if you expect all the fans, like a packed house, you're not going to get that until next year if you want to not spread this virus. Now, I've also seen that Jeff Gluck had tweeted out that Homestead could be a site of a return. And with all the relaxed rules in Florida, first of all, not going to get political, but it's insane that they've opened the beaches already. It's possible to go start the season back in Florida. I would advise against it, because it is not a good look what's going down in Florida right now. But if you are that desperate to get races back out, it's the right move. But you're going to face a lot of backlash from people who are going to say you are being too risky right now.
Yeah, with talk of trying to get the schedule back on and trying to get the season back underway, if it means no fans at these races, the way I interpret it is, if NASCAR is if they're so committed on getting all 36 races run at some point in this season, I don't think it's a choice of whether or not they can have fans at these races. They've got to start running these races at first without fans if they want to get all 36 races in. Because if this thing keeps going and if NASCAR puts out something how they don't want to run races with no fans in attendance, well, then it's going to carry on through the summer. It's going to carry on through May, probably into June at least. And then with a lot of talk that this thing is going to spike back up in the fall, that's going to put a halt to racing altogether, and that would probably cancel out the rest of the season. And by that point, the season's just lost at that point. But I feel like if they want to get all of these races run, they've got to start running races without fans in attendance. Justin, anything to add on to that?
I'm not the biggest fan of right now getting the season back going, and obviously, I think the health and safety of the drivers and all of the crew members and the teams and the owners and the track workers. That's got to be priority before any money talk can occur, or going back racing, I should say. Because I said it when NASCAR was trying to get the race in Atlanta. It only takes one person to get sick for it all to shut down again. That's all it's going to take. If one member of the garage has it, and you got to shut the season down for at least 2 weeks, probably even more, or in that scenario. So you got to be very cautious of what you can do at the moment. I don't think a race should take place before at least Memorial Day. And even that, I think, is still too early for NASCAR to go back. I mean, right now the restrictions say that it's 2 weeks, I want to say, with continuing decreasing numbers. That's kind of the current guidelines. So if NASCAR can, I think NASCAR should and not be jumping when that restriction happens. I think they should be waiting just a little bit longer just to make sure our drivers, our crew members, everybody is safe. Because NASCAR is not a sport where you have, let's say, 100 necessary personnel needing to work a basketball game. It takes probably 100 people to do that. And you got your players, your coaches, and TV crew. That's pretty much all you need for basketball at the moment. NASCAR, you're at least involving 1,000 people, probably even more if you're going to try to cram in the Xfinity and Truck Series with it.
Yeah, Gavin, your take on this?
Yeah, jumping off of Justin's point too, is also like media members as well. Like how now, obviously, with this NASCAR events going on, they've been doing teleconferences, so I figured they'd probably migrate over to that kind of like resort, that method in terms of interviewing. But, like as Justin mentioned, there's crew members, there's, the drivers, there's officials too, officials all over the racetrack in general. So, there's already an influx of people. And, I'm in the same boat where like I'd rather prioritize the safety of everybody, for the sake of this pandemic. And, like Justin said, it takes one person to get sick, and it's basically could be a chain reaction for all I know, because you don't really know the symptoms, at least until like you actually start to feel them. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes you don't feel them until like a week or two after you basically get them. So like I'd rather prioritize the safety. I'd rather be overcautious in this case. It's again, safety and health is important during this time. That's why there's a stay-at-home initiative. And if we went racing theoretically, I don't think it's a good idea personally, though. Like obviously, all of us want races in the season, but I think we have to think of the bigger picture for the sanity of us and for the drivers alike, is that we want them to be safe. I'd rather have little to no races, but to know that all these drivers, personnel, and media members themselves are safe and sound. They aren't having a contraction of the coronavirus. I know a friend down, I think he was at Las Vegas, so he got a case of the coronavirus. He's been fighting it, and he's doing fine though. By the way, he's around our age. If you guys are wondering, a little bit older than us, so his immune system is just fine. But I'd rather again prioritize that safety. Have all those procedures necessary to prevent like a bigger pandemic, especially for NASCAR's case, and for other sports in general are kind of like this as well, so I'd rather follow this safe route and just wait until we find an actual cure, for this COVID-19.
Yeah, and I do want to clarify with my statement on like NASCAR, should they get back to racing, like only like I would much rather they race in front of no fans than have a packed house there, obviously. That is if they're really committed to running all 36 races, which if this thing keeps going on, it's just going to postpone the inevitable, which I would think is just canceling the rest of the season and write it off like 2004, 2005 NHL season. Just forget about it. But I will say, if they decide that they're going to do races, which – I mean, I would think it'd be nice to have races back, but it's not a necessity right now because you all mentioned it. Health and safety of NASCAR crews, drivers, media members, personnel, it's paramount to everything right now. I would say they can only go back racing if they have health screenings or like checkpoints at every entrance gate. And like every day, people walking in, I can speak from experience at working at Walmart right now. When I've been going in, they have us go through a certain section back in automotive. They take thermometers, they scan our foreheads for our temperatures. If you're not having a fever, you can go in. If you have a fever, you're told go home and stay there for 2 weeks. So and for athletes like NASCAR drivers, obviously it's going to be a little more extensive. But if they can get health screenings and checkpoints at every entrance gate for when the drivers come into the track, when they're entering the facility, or just entering the garage area, if they have that every day for every driver, crew member, media member, then it can be pulled off. But even then, at the same time, it's still risky. So I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know when NASCAR will get back to racing, if they'll get back to racing, and that includes IndyCar, Formula One especially, with how it's such an international issue, and even World of Outlaws. Like I know Lakeside Speedway over here in the Kansas City area, they postponed their season opener initially set for May 1st, and I know I-70 Speedway is supposed to have their grand reopening after a 12-year closure on May the 30th, but I can't imagine that that's going to stay around for longer if this pandemic continues on. So just I would much rather err on the side of caution. I would love to see racing get back, but at the same time, the drivers and everybody in the sport or across the world of motorsports, they need to be safe. Better safe than sorry.
And I will say also, if I'm being perfectly honest, like I feel like those resources to test all of the if we were to ever go back, I feel like they would it'd be kind of wasteful to the bigger crisis at hand. I think those would be much better suited in other areas that are not involved around racing, and because at the end of the day, yes, it's a NASCAR, and yes, there is a sport. It is a sport, but it's also entertainment, and I feel like at the end of the day, the safety of others needs to be above of the sport and the entertainment of NASCAR itself.
Yep, pretty much said it. Let's look at the next item on the agenda. There's not much left. I do want to start by talking about the future of NASCAR drivers in esports. Because of the Kyle Larson incident that happened, there's been a lot of discussion as to whether or not sponsors would be hesitant to keep backing their drivers running in iRacing events or just any simulated racing events in general. And it was not, that theory was not helped by the release of the entry list for this weekend's NASCAR event at Virtual Richmond Raceway. The entry list is down to 26 drivers, which a lot of fans have speculated, oh, well, that's because sponsors are hesitant. Well, at the same time, Dale Jr. actually brought up a really good point, because he was initially listed for the race and he withdrew in hopes that some other drivers would get some opportunity for iRacing events. But it will feature, okay, I'm looking now at the NASCAR.com website as I read this. It'll be a 150-lap event on Sunday. It'll feature a 30-car field, 26 invited entries, and 4 transferring from a Sunday morning qualifying race. This could also be an attempt to scale back all the carnage and the wreckage from last weekend's race at Bristol, or at least the race at Bristol a couple weeks ago, I should say. So I guess I'll start with Gavyn. Gavyn, you have an iRacing rig, and I think I can see it in the background, but yeah, there it is. What's your do you think this move was done to scale back on having just a caution-filled event for iRacing, or do you think this is a result of sponsors and drivers becoming hesitant on taking part in iRacing because of what happened to Kyle Larson?
I feel like it's more or less like how the NASCAR races have been though in the past. Like Bristol was just a smash fest in general though, and even we saw like Clint Boyer basically intentionally wrecked Bubba Wallace on TV basically, and that's when you kind of, I think it also creates that divide of, are people taking this seriously or not? Questions like the status of iRacing sometimes, because like, in this case, in NASCAR, this Pro Invitational Series, they have like quick repairs, right? So there's like a 1 or 2 this time around. I know they had a lot in the first race, and that was a crash fest in itself.
I think they're only getting.
I think it's just one.
I think it's
one this time.
Yeah, I think it's one. I think it's one this time. But I could go on a full tangent about this, and I probably will. So I do apologize in advance. But more or less, like, I think it's more or less to. It depends, because some of the drivers are actually really good at the game, but then you can tell some just aren't accustomed to iRacing in general, though. Like it's a big transition. It may seem not the case, but it actually really is. So like, we already know that William Byron is like really good at it, but then you look at Jimmy Johnson, it's not the most, let's just say, spectacular of it in polite terms, So like, there's that. I understand Dale Jr. Withdrawing because, he wants new people to join in on the fun, basically. But I think also it's really more or less due to the quality of racing we've seen in the past weekends in this NASCAR Pro Invitational Series, because it hasn't really been as fun to watch. Texas was good. I thought Texas was fun to watch, though. Obviously, iRacing still has its like pros and cons. The crash physics, you can tell it's kind of rubber bandery in a way. How like the Texas wreck, Ryan Blaney bounced off the wall, and the way he flung back onto the track and killed like the middle of the pack, basically. Obviously iRacing will always have those flaws in it, and it's fun to drive. Trust me, when I messed around with the sim a good amount, to have an understanding. But like, if I wanted to broadcast like NASCAR stuff, and I think you guys know this series is like the Coca-Cola NASCAR series, with like Zach Novak and Logan Clampett, I think, is in it. Like a lot of like pros that are specialized in iRacing. In my opinion, I think there's a YouTuber that's done this. Iceberg has actually mentioned this in his YouTube channel. But like, I think if they had broadcasted the Coca-Cola series, I think like it would be much cleaner. You'd see a lot more better racing, because like the drivers are confident racing with each other. They at least know how to race each other. It's not discrediting the cup drivers or the drivers that are, specializing in the real field of racing, like you're actually driving the car in real life on a track and not a virtual one. And again, it's not really discredit anybody in this case, but more or less, like you at least know the etiquette, iRacing, like they are familiar with iRacing long enough to know how well they can race each other, if you kind of get what I'm going at. So, but again, back to like the sponsorship stuff, I think it's, well, I mean, like, you don't have to put much money in sponsorship for like something as virtual as it compared to like a real car, though, cost-wise. If there even is little to no cost at all when you think about it now. So like, but it's really, I think, in my opinion, just due to the quality of the racing itself.
Good point there. And yeah, I do think if the races broadcast were the Coca-Cola E series, it would be much cleaner. It would resemble actual racing that you would find on Sunday afternoon in non-pandemic time for NASCAR racing. Hal, anything to add on?
I think Gavin hit the nail on the head with. I think it's just a quality that they need. They need it cleaned up. Dale Jr. dropping out of it. I think that I'm not sure if that was completely necessary, but it is his choice after all. I mean, I think he brought a lot of eyes to it because everyone loves to see Dale Jr. out racing, even if it's virtual. So what's going to be interesting to me is going to be ratings after this. Will there be a fall off because Dale Jr.'s out? I think that's a realistic question because he is still the biggest name associated with NASCAR, even if he's retired. So I think it's still good that he's going to get somebody new in there. That's a good way to do it. And kudos to Dale Jr. for dropping out. I mean, if that's the reason why, you know what? Fair enough. But the problem I'm going to see with it is that William Byron is so good at it that are they going to have the problem like when Jimmy Johnson won 7 championships where people get tired of watching William Byron go out there and win iRaces? And that's a real question to have. Like, you know, you can only watch a guy win a race so many times in real life. Watching iRaces, we were watching, have fun, see is someone going to be a goof and go wreck somebody on purpose like Clint Boyer? But that can be to the detriment of the quality too, where you're kind of straying a line there of this is entertainment, but some of these guys should be taking this more seriously just for the quality of the race. So it'll be interesting to see with new drivers in there. Dale Jr. was obviously racing seriously, so I feel like losing him in the field will hurt kind of.
Justin, anything to add on?
I'm not the biggest fan right now of the field dropping to 30, and there's a reason for that. I mean, obviously, it's all Cup guys in right now who are the 26 guys who are locked. But there's also some Cup guys who are not locked into this race that really surprised me. You have Cole Custer, who's not locked into this race, Corey LaJoie, Michael McDowell, Daniel Suarez. I mean, and those are 3 guys that are, I would say, either mid to pretty huge names. And Michael McDowell's been doing pretty well in the iRacing series. So it's been surprising to see him out on the entry list. And I would probably argue that Garrett Smithley and Timmy Hill would be on that list if it wasn't for their performances in the first 3 weeks.
I'd throw in Parker Kligerman's name to that too.
Parker Kligerman and Landon Castle, those are probably going to be the 2 guys that Fox is going to pick as their provisional guys. So you're going to have 2 Cup regulars who are not going to race in this race. And I just don't feel like that's right. I mean, because you still got Jimmy John. I mean, because I think you have quality drivers. I mean, obviously, you have your good drivers, and then you have your big stars where you have Kevin Harvick Kevin Harvick's finally showing up to the party. He hasn't raced in an iRacing event so far this season. You have Jimmy Johnson, who's been proven to be a little bit of a wreckfest. Clint Boyer and Bubba Wallace, they've had their controversies. So I'm a little disappointed with the picking and choosing. I think any Cup guy should be automatically locked in if they are a full-timer. But as far as the quality of racing, I think that's the bigger argument. And obviously Bristol was not the best of races, and real world consequences kind of was the big aftermath of that race. So I think you're not only going to see a less intentional wrecking and a lot less and more typical gaming strategies, I would say, like rage quitting and like just the nature of just gaming online in general. I think you're going to see a lot more guys take it seriously, because you only have the 1 reset, and I think that was a big problem at Bristol, was having the 2, because they bumped it back up from 1 to 2 for Bristol, which turned out to be a disaster. But we'll see what the ratings are this week. I think they were going to be a lot lower without Dale Jr. regardless. And I think this is going to be the week where we finally are in the meat of the NASCAR iRacing relationship, I would say. Because we had 3 weeks where it was kind of the honeymoon period. And now we're kind of into, okay, this is our reality from here on out. And I'm not sure how it's going to play out. And I'm really hoping for a good race for Richmond, but you're going to see some changes going forward, I would say.
Safe to say changes will be made. Real quick, I do want to share the screen because I'm going to pull up the entry list for the qualifying race that's supposed to be held on the Sunday morning. So I'll get that pulled up right about now. Okay, so here is the qualifying race entry list. It is 4 drivers. Okay, the top 2 finishers from the qualifying race will advance. 2 additional drivers chosen by Fox will be given provisionals. So you have Quinn Houff, Dale Jr., Brennan Poole, Bobby Labonte, Corey LaJoie, Michael McDowell, Cole Custer, Ricky Stenhouse, Chad Fincham, J.J. Yaley, Joey Gase, Landon Castle, and Daniel Suarez, all taking part in this event, or at least in the qualifying race. So I guess this could serve as the start of our picks, considering we'll be making picks to round out the show. Gavyn, you're the special guest, so I'm going to start with you on this. Which 4 drivers do you see from this qualifying race advancing to the main event?
Now, I'm going to guess that I don't know if Dale Jr. is actually going to race the qualifying race since he said he withdrew. So I'm going to assume he's not racing. Now, if he does, he's probably going to be like a shoo-in unless he literally gets wrecked or something. Because I figured it's going to be no cautions for like a qualifying race because it was at Texas. That's from what I remember when I watched it. But I haven't watched the other ones to really have an idea of what's to happen. But I think let's see, Landon Castle I think will make it in. I think he's got enough, like he's consistent usually in terms of like iRacing so far. He's been consistent. Let's see who else. Michael McDowell has been pretty solid, another consistent kind of guy. Now the other 2 are going to be weird for me because like when I look at all these other ones, they're kind of like in a weird scenario, I guess, because I don't really see them near the front, or at least even in the mid pack. I feel sometimes because Daniel Suarez, we've known him, he's been intentionally wrecking like people left and right. I feel like in these races so far hasn't had the best track record in terms of iRacing stuff.
He did a Danica 2012.
Yeah, I tried to wreck Ty Dillon at Texas and basically murdered himself in the inside wall. So I mean, and then what happened in Bristol with Kyle Larson and all that didn't fare out too well. I think everybody knows that well enough. And let's see, other 2 people I'm looking at. I'm feeling Cole Custer. Cole Custer's a pretty good short track racer, I feel. A bit bold on my part. And then let's see, I might go. I'm feeling Corey LaJoie as well. Corey LaJoie's had some success in short tracks as well. I remember him in K&N stuff. Like there's that one Richmond race he was running pretty solid, despite that one Ray Galding incident. But like Corey LaJoie's pretty solid short track racer, so I'd probably have those 4. So it's Corey LaJoie, Cole Custer, Landon Castle, and who else did I say? Was it?
I think it was Dale Jr. on the condition that he is racing.
Michael McDowell. This is the assumption that Dale Jr. is not racing. So yeah.
Right now, I'm going under the assumption that Jr. is racing because I think the tweet that he sent out was during the middle of the week, and this was on Thursday night when the article came out. I think he was like a shoo-in for the main event, but then he pulled out of the main event and then was stuck in the qualifying race instead. So we'll have to see what goes on there. Hal, your picks, top 4 drivers to get out of this qualifying race that's happening.
And we are assuming that Dale Jr. is racing.
Correct.
Dale Jr. Yeah, Landon Castle was a good pick, so I'll go with him too. He's pretty good on iRacing. Every time I see Corey LaJoie's name pop up in my head during a predictions thing, including real races, I always pick Corey LaJoie. I feel like that's a problem, so I'm going to pick Corey LaJoie anyway. And I also have the problem where I see J.J. Yaley and I say he's going to make the Daytona 500, then he didn't, so I'm not going to pick him. Or Yaley. I go with Daniel Suarez for that last spot.
All right. Justin, you're 4.
I think there was something that was said that Fox was going to pick 2 drivers.
Yes.
In there somewhere. So let's just get the obvious out of the way. It's going to be Dale Jr. But the second guy is going to be I do not see Parker Kligerman on that list. So
Kligerman's in the main event.
So
already.
Kligerman's in the main event. So that means
Correct.
Castle's getting in by default there. So it's basically the 2 guys. It's like Daytona qualifying. You're picking the 2 guys who are going to finish the highest in the duels, basically. So I'm going to go with Michael McDowell. He's been very solid in the iRacing events so far. And I'm going to throw out kind of a wild card here. I think it's going to be JJ Yaley who gets that second spot. And Yaley was pretty solid at Bristol, and I think with decent equipment, I think he's learned from 2006 a bit. And I think he could surprise some people by beating out guys like Ricky Stenhouse, Cole Custer. By the way, how the heck is Ricky Stenhouse in the qualifying event?
Probably based upon results, I would think.
Yeah, probably.
I think also like the races are fixed setup from what I remember. So the cars are pretty much even. So equipment doesn't mean jack squat. It's just a matter of how you drive the car. So think of it so in an iRacing perspective, there's fixed races. So in this case, A class is the cup car, B class is like the Xfinity car, C class is the truck. Obviously, there's the fixed setup. So it's just about drivability and how you can manage your tires, or like how you can get aggressive on restarts when it's necessary. So it's really up to how these drivers are going to manage the characteristics of virtual Richmond that will make them prosper, as well as just get lucky because, cautions breed cautions, or crashes breed crashes in this case too. So,
and that's why I'm not picking Ricky Stenhouse or Cole Custer right there.
Dang. Well, okay. For my 4, if Dale Jr. doesn't finish in the top 2, I feel like he's going to get picked by Fox anyway. So he's a shoe-in. Just put him in there first slot. Second spot, I think I'll go Corey LaJoy. Third pick, I'm going to go with Michael McDowell. And fourth pick, I'm daring to be bold here. Fourth pick, I'm going to say Ricky Stenhouse. So those are my 4 to get into the main event on Sunday, which we'll have a look at the entry list right now. So there are 26 drivers on the Toyota Owners 150, presented by Toyota. So we have a look here. We have Kurt Busch, Brad Keselowski, Austin Dillon. Well, you have both the Dillon brothers, all 3 from Penske. You've got at least one of the Chip Ganassi rides. Yep, because Kyle Larson's not on there. You have Kevin Harvick, Clint Boyer. They were locked in. 3 of the 4 Gibbs guys, Hamlin, Busch, and Jones. Plus, you've got Ross Chastain in the 6. You got Chris Buescher in the 17. Let's see, Chase Elliott, William Byron, Jimmy Johnson, Alex Bowman, Christopher Bell's in here. You have 3 invitationals with Smithley, Hill, and Kligerman. And don't forget Bubba Wallace and John Hunter Nemechek there. Plus Ryan Preece is also in this event, as well as Tyler Reddick driving the 31 car. So, and Matt DiBenedetto. Can't forget DiBenedetto. So, out of all of these drivers, plus I'd say the 4 that were picked from the previous qualifying race, who is going to be the victor of the Toyota Owners 150? We'll start with Gavin.
Well, I think it's got to be someone that specializes in short tracks. So when we got notable names, we think of like Denny Hamlin. He's had a very good track record at Richmond. Who else would be a good one? I mean, Kyle Busch has been pretty solid. If Martin Truex Jr. was actually racing, he'd be pretty good. He's pretty consistent there. Joey Logano also has a good track record, I would say, at that track. William Byron, just based on iRacing standards, we know he's going to be like a hard contender. Ryan Preece has also had some expertise at Richmond as well. Really, in short tracks in general, he's a good short track ace in my opinion. But I feel like I'm feeling Denny Hamlin's going to win this race. I feel like it's just based upon his past success at the racetrack. Denny Hamlin just usually knows like the P's and Q's of Richmond International. Winning there, 2016 was the recent year he's won. But even so, he's still had some pretty solid efforts for his resume at that track.
All right. So Gavin Do picks Denny Hamlin to win on Sunday. Hal Leestep, your pick.
I have 2 predictions, one to win, one for a moment that will happen in the race. If Dale Jr. makes it to the main show, he is going to turn Kyle Busch because it's 2008 again. And for the winner, the 24 is just staring me in the face, and if I bet against him, then I'm going to lose. So naturally, I'm going to bet against him. I want to see Matt DiBenedetto win. I don't think I'm predicting that he'll win. He was very good at Bristol last year. We know that way too well about how good he was.
All right. Justin, your pick.
This driver always seems to win at the right time. Like, no matter what's going on with NASCAR, no matter what's going on in the world, this driver seems to win it and at the right place at the right time. And I'm very tempted to say going to do it. I think we're going to have a united win. I think Dale Jr., if he races, comes out of the transfer race as a Fox provisional and wins in the iRacing event at Richmond. Whether or not he has to dump Kyle Busch out of the way for it, that is to be determined.
So it'll basically be like Casey Kane from the All-Star Race 2008 with a mix of Carl Edwards doing a slight alteration of a bump and run from 2016.
I mean, or I could just say Kyle Larson dumps Dale Jr. again and Clint Boyer comes out with the win and they'll really tick fans off.
Well, yeah, Larson's not even going to be in this thing. So let's see. For my pick, there's a lot of names that are jumping out at me here, but I feel like I'm going to go with, well, if it was a normal race, I would probably say Chase Elliott, but it's not a normal race, so it's not Chase Elliott. I say Clint Boyer is going to wreck someone intentionally again, and he'll get himself parked and maybe banned from iRacing. Kyle Busch, he'll be laps down off the pace, so Junior won't have to worry about him.
Well, Matt Kenseth was laps down at Martinsville in 2015. Hey, that's Joey Logano.
Hey now, different situation.
I don't think Kyle has a reason to do that to him, but you never know.
Who knows? Now I'm just thinking of the list of what could go wrong in that situation, and it's not good.
You know,
and it stems back to Larson.
Ram him into the turn 3 wall.
Oh man. Let's see. Who am I gonna pick? I will say, just because of his iRacing experience alone, I'm gonna go William Byron. Whoa, not all those guys. William Byron. There we go. Yep, that's my pick to win. I think Byron, I mean, he won at Bristol. He won at Bristol. Wow. Timmy Hill won at Texas. I should know this. But yeah, William Byron, I think he can go 2 in a row. He's got a real knack for this iRacing thing. And he ran, I mean, even though it's completely different things, not entirely, but I mean, he finished second at Martinsville in the fall. Martinsville and Richmond are kind of similar in the fact that they're both short tracks with just some bit of banking. I think William Byron will be able to get it done.
Real quick question.
Yeah.
And who will probably need escorted out of the iRacing in racetrack by police he's heading into this weekend?
Clint Boyer. That's my
Probably.
guess. Clint Boyer will be escorted by the police out of the racetrack.
Jeff and Mike would be like on him though. Like they just focus the camera on him, then they'd be like, Clint, what are you doing out there? You're not supposed to do that.
And Clint would probably say something, man, I tried to go after him, man.
I got loose.
I got loose. I got loose.
Larry Mack shows up just out of nowhere to talk with Clint Boyer.
It's like a sandwich or something. He ate an ice cream that last broadcast.
Yeah, just have Larry Mack like having some lunch. He's like, now let's talk about the trans of what we've noticed in Clint Boyer's performance. Let's talk trans.
Probably dips an Oreo into soda to have soda cookies.
Old soda cookie again.
Oh no.
Yeah, this is where we know the show is going out of hand. So
we've gone for 2.5 hours. I think it's time.
Yeah, just about 2 hours. So yeah, it's about that time. So that's basically going to do it for us. Gavin, is there anything you want to plug about what you do or with KRU or any last bit you want to bring up?
I mean, I host a show called The Repave on KRU Radio. I'm not the best at advertising in general, though. So that's something that's honestly a weakness of mine, because I don't like to come off as like braggish or anything, even though like it's justified to like expose yourself out there. I mean, I have my Twitter account, literally just my name. So there's anything else. I help out with a couple YouTube channels. So like I have my own channel called N2003 Gamer. I have a lot of memes on there, so I probably should get rid of them sooner or later. But I usually do a lot of like digital designing on the side, so I do need to post. Like, I should probably create like a Twitter page of this sort regarding that, because I've done it for like 2009 basically. So a lot of like paint scheme liveries for like stock cars and all that, not for real life people, but for like sim racing and stuff. So I've done that. It's just called N2003 Gamer. So N2003 NASCAR Racing 2003. Sterling will know this because it's a very old simulator, basically. But other than that, though, yeah, it's not too much, though. I'm just glad I have this opportunity to just talk with you guys, getting to know you guys. I mean, I've known Sterling for a while, obviously, when we met at Kansas, for crying out loud. But, seeing Justin and Hal, giving some wonderful insights, on their opinions and what's going on in terms of the motorsports industry, it really is awesome to hear so many different insights, and also just to have an open mind about it, because, sometimes NASCAR fans aren't really the most open-minded of people. Let's just say that. Maybe they're toxic from time to time, but that's just sports in general, though. They're always going to have that toxicity. But having people with similar insights, or maybe different ones, but in a cordial conversation, is truly the best kind of combo that I've been looking forward to, especially in podcasts or discussions like these. So again, it's such an honor to really co-star with you guys, just to be a guest, and maybe more often I could pop in here and there more often like this. Yeah. So it's really fun to talk with you guys.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you back on whenever the opportunity presents itself. So thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk with us. I know it's been hectic, especially since we were supposed to do this last night, but due to some personal stuff, we had to move it to today. But thank you again for taking the time and being flexible with us and talking with us. And hopefully we'll get to meet up at some point soon. The plan was to meet up at Kansas, but
I hope I meet you guys all at Kansas. Like,
hopefully,
that'd be the squad goals.
Hopefully October.
Yeah. That's squad goals. I'm honestly saying that's squad goals right there. If we can get like all you guys to come over or something like that, then you guys get to meet Breyer and Brett Winningham and Jonathan Feld and the gang too. Like, there's a lot of cool people down there in the media center. Dude, like, I met Jonathan Feld. I can't believe I met Jonathan Feld, because I've known him for a long time. So like sim racing and all that. We talked to sim racing. So yeah, you get to meet some cool faces around, the media. I would say, I'd hope most of them are pretty nice people in general, though. So Matt Humphrey was dope at the speedways. So yeah.
So yeah, that's going to do it for us, for our special guest, Gavyn Do, as well as my co-hosts, Hal Estep and Justin Parmer. Thank you for watching this special edition of Burnin Rubber, the socially distanced edition. We'll be back recording the next edition of this show at some point next weekend. Until the next time, I'm Sterling Siemens, signing off.